Our race as Filipinos started from our indigenous roots long before the country's colonization by Spain and the United States. In our long history as a nation, our indigenous people continue to fight for equal rights and protection from our government up to this day. Many of them continue to be victims of injustice. And joining us tonight here on NewsLife is Ms. Victoria Tauli-Corpuz, Executive Director of Tebtebba. Good evening, ma'am, and welcome to NewsLife.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Ma'am, to start us off, how many indigenous peoples groups do we have here in the Philippines?
Well, it's estimated to be between 115 to 120.
And which are the more prominent ones in the major groups of the Philippines?
Well, of course, the Igorot, of which I am one of them, the Lumad in Mindanao, which are composed of the Mandaya, the Mansaka, the Aitas, as well as the Tagbanwas in Palawan, and of course the Kalanguyas in Nueva Vizcaya. So there are many different groups all over the country, spread all over the country.
Ma'am, what are the most pressing problems which our IPs face that gives them a feeling of victims of discrimination?
One is the non-recognition of the rights of indigenous peoples to their lands, territories, and resources. Another is, of course, the discrimination that they face from the dominant society as well as from government institutions. Still, other problems is the non-recognition of their customary governance systems and land management systems, which are not similar to the dominant or the national systems that are imposed on them.
Ma'am, why has it been a problem for indigenous people to protect and preserve their ancestral lands?
Well, first of all, there is in the past the land rights that they have, the way that regard their land systems and the way that they govern their lands, these have not been recognized by the government. There is a national law which says that many of these communities or territories of indigenous peoples are considered state lands, and their land tenure systems, for instance, their collective use of their lands or ownership of their lands are not likewise recognized. Of course, this is now rectified with the existence of the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act.
Ma'am, how about in the preservation of culture for the future generations? Is there something being done at a national level to preserve this?
Well, from what I know, the National Commission on Culture and Arts and CCA, they are really doing what they can to be able to really reinforce or strengthen the cultures of indigenous peoples. And in the education, they also have now a division called Indigenous Peoples Office, where they are trying to work on indigenizing the curriculum of the school. So I think there are some efforts already being done in relation to recognizing these cultures as well as these customary laws.
Ma'am, and majority of our indigenous people are marginalized, and in many areas of the countries they are given dole-outs by the government. What programs should be provided to enhance their productivity?
First of all, I think that there should be programs and policies that will recognize the viability of the indigenous production systems, whether these are in production of their traditional foods, as well as in the protection also of the forests that they have been doing since time immemorial. So I think there should really be policies that will be strong enough to support that. And they should be provided as well appropriate technologies which will lighten the burdens that they have in working in their own agricultural areas.
Ma'am, are you having struggles as the economic development is going into the country and at the same time preserving culture and the environment of the IPs?
Yeah, a lot of problems are happening because the priorities sometimes that are set by government are not necessarily consistent with the priorities of indigenous peoples. For instance, if the government has targeted an area to be a mineral or a mining site, and the consent in the free, prior, informed consent of indigenous peoples is not obtained, this will really create a lot of conflicts between government agencies, between the corporations and the indigenous peoples who would like to be consulted and involved in making decisions about how their lands will be used.
Ma'am, and you are due to be appointed as Rapporteur of the United Nations Congratulations. How will you champion the cause of our indigenous people in the World Organization?
Well, we will. I will, as a special rapporteur, I will be allowed to pay visits to countries where problems of indigenous peoples are very serious, and it will allow me to also engage in dialogues with governments to see whether there can be good practices be undertaken to address these problems. And I will also be able to make deeper studies of the roots of these problems and possible solutions to the problems that indigenous peoples face.
Finally, ma'am, what's your ultimate wish or goal as a representative of the IPs?
Well, my ultimate wish is that most governments, of course, in the dominant society as well as the private sector, should really implement very seriously the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, because this is the international instrument that will allow for a more dignified living of indigenous peoples as well as well-being for all of them.
All right, and on that note, thank you very much, Ms. Victoria Tauli-Corpuz, Executive Director of the Tebtebba, due to be appointed Rapporteur for the Indigenous Peoples in the United Nations. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much.